Imagine waking up knowing today might be the day your entire civilization dies. And marching anyway. It's the year 216 BC. On a hot, dusty plain near a small town called Cannae, Rome has assembled one of the largest armies in its history. Consuls, senators, veterans, fresh recruits. An ocean of shields and red cloaks. So many men that the ground itself seems to tremble under their feet. They have one goal: crush Hannibal, end this nightmare. Prove that no one humiliates Rome and lives. Across the field, Hannibal Barca watches them assemble. He has crossed the Alps, buried Roman armies in rivers and fog, and carved his name into their nightmares. Now outnumbered, far from home, with a mixed army of Africans, Spaniards, and Gauls at his back. He's about to try something so insanely bold that every military academy in the world still teaches it today. Rome doesn't know it yet, but it is marching into a perfect trap. A trap that will surround its army on all sides, turn sheer numbers into a curse, and turn a sunny day on an open plain into one of the greatest massacres in ancient history. This is the story of Cannae, the day Hannibal taught Rome what fear really is. Before Cannae was a battlefield, it was a question. How far will one man go to keep a childhood promise? Two cities that couldn't share a sea. Long before Hannibal and his army stood on Italian soil, two very different powers were already circling each other. On one shore of the Mediterranean, Rome, a land power. Farmers turned soldiers, a republic that believed discipline and stubbornness could solve anything. On the other shore, Carthage, a sea power. Traders, sailors, merchants, a city that measured its influence in harbors, silver mines, and cargo holds. They didn't start as mortal enemies. For a long time, Rome was just one more Italian city-state, and Carthage was one more rich port in the west. But the Mediterranean is too small for two rising powers with the same habit. If there's a problem, send an army. The clash was inevitable. It began with Sicily, the First Punic War. Rome learns to swim. When conflict finally broke out over Sicily, no one expected it to last 23 years. Carthage began that war with all the advantages. A professional navy, experienced admirals, a network of bases around the western Mediterranean. Rome began with almost no fleet, no experience at sea. A stubborn refusal to admit it was out of its depth. Anyone else might have accepted a limit. We're a land power. We'll negotiate. Rome did something else. Built fleets from scratch. Copied Carthaginian ship designs from wrecks and captured vessels. Trained thousands of raw crews. Lost fleets in storms. And built new fleets again. Battle by battle, wreck by wreck, Rome turned the sea into just another battlefield it expected to win on. By the time the First Punic War ended, Carthage was exhausted, its navy battered, its treasury strained, its mercenaries angry over later missing pay. Rome forced Carthage to give up Sicily, pay a heavy indemnity. On paper, Rome had won. On the streets and docks of Carthage, it felt more like humiliation. In that defeated city lived a man named Hamilcar Barca. To his enemies, he was a stubborn Carthaginian general, the commander who had held out in Sicily until the very end. To his family, he was something else. A father. A man who had watched Rome strip his city of power. Someone who had no intention of letting that be the end of the story. Hamilcar understood two things. Carthage was too weakened at sea to challenge Rome head-on again in Sicily. The city needed new strength somewhere else. His eyes turned to Iberia, the land we now call Spain. Rich in silver mines, soldiers for hire, land that was not yet under Rome's thumb if Carthage couldn't beat Rome with the forces it had left. it would have to grow new ones. And he would need someone to carry that struggle further than he himself might live. At home, in the shadow of that decision, a boy watched. His name was Hannibal. There is a scene that Carthaginian and Roman writers never forgot. We don't know every exact word. We don't know if it happened in a grand temple or a more private shrine. But we know the core of it. Before Hamilcar left Carthage to begin his campaigns in Iberia, he brought his young son, maybe around 9 years old, to stand with him at the altar. The boy is close enough to smell the incense, to feel the stone under his bare feet, to hear the distant sounds of the harbor outside. Hamilcar has already made his decision. Now he wants to bind his heir to it. He turns to the boy and asks for a promise. Not, "Will you be a good citizen?" but, "Will you be Rome's enemy for as long as you live?" The boy agrees. Maybe he doesn't fully understand yet, but he understands enough. Rome humiliated his father. Rome took Carthaginian land and pride. Rome is the name his family speaks with teeth clenched. In some versions of the story, Hannibal lays his hand on the sacrificial animal or on the altar itself and swears, as long as he lives, he will never be a friend to Rome. It is half political act, half religious ritual, half family trauma. For Hamilcar, it's insurance. If I can't finish this, my son will. For Hannibal, it's the first chain on his life. He will carry that promise into every decision he makes. From Iberia to the Italian plains, when Hamilcar leaves Carthage with his son and his army, he isn't fleeing. He's reloading. In Iberia, he begins to build something like a private empire, conquering tribes, striking deals with local leaders, securing silver mines that pour wealth back into his war machine. Out there, far from the Carthaginian political class that often hesitates, the Barcid family can move faster. Recruit Iberian warriors, train them under Carthaginian officers, pay them directly with silver, shape them into an army that owes more to Hamilcar than to the distant city senate. Hannibal grows up in this world. Campfires, not comfortable villas. War councils instead of polite dinners. Maps scratched in dust, with Rome always an invisible weight on the other side of the sea. He learns how to ride, how to fight, how to read terrain, how to speak to Iberian allies in ways they understand. He's not a prince of a peaceful port city. He is the son of a man who is quietly preparing for round 2. Meanwhile, across the sea, Rome is not resting. The Republic takes Sardinia and Corsica when Carthage is too weak to resist, continues to expand its grip in Italy, watches Iberia with a calculating eye. To many Romans, Carthage looks dangerous but weakened, annoying but containable, still a rival but one that can be managed with pressure and treaties. Rome is growing used to the idea that if there is a problem, send 2 consuls, 4 legions, and don't stop until it's solved. They haven't met this version of Hannibal yet, but he is watching them. Hamilcar eventually dies in Iberia, fighting the same long struggle he carried with him from Sicily. His mantle passes to his son-in-law, Hasdrubal, who keeps expanding the Iberian base, founding Carthago Nova, New Carthage, as a stronghold, signing a treaty with Rome that sets the Ebro River as a line, Carthaginian influence to the south, Roman influence to the north. For a while, this fragile balance holds. It cannot last. Around 221 BC, Hasdrubal is assassinated. Command in Iberia passes at last to Hamilcar's son, Hannibal Barca. He's in his mid-20s, young for a commander, old enough for war. The soldiers who've grown up in the Barcid orbit don't hesitate. They know his lineage. They know the stories. They swear loyalty. Hannibal now commands hardened Iberian infantry, fierce cavalry from Iberia and North Africa, a veteran Carthaginian officer corps, access to rich mines and deep local alliances, and somewhere in the back of his mind, the old oath burns. Never be a friend to Rome. He doesn't have to go looking for a reason to keep it. Rome is about to hand him one. South of the Ebro, in eastern Iberia, there is a city called Saguntum. It's not massive, it's not a capital, but it is, rich, strategically placed, friendly, perhaps too friendly, to Rome. In Roman eyes, Saguntum is not officially theirs, but it is under their protection. In Carthaginian eyes, Saguntum lies on their side of the Ebro line. For a while, everyone pretends this contradiction can be ignored. Then conflicts break out between Saguntum and neighboring tribes friendly to Carthage. The city calls to Rome for help. Rome protests to Carthage. Carthage hesitates. Hannibal does not. For him, Saguntum is more than a quarrelsome city. It is a test. If he backs down, Iberian allies will doubt Carthaginian strength. If he attacks, Rome will rage. But he'll prove to everyone watching that the Barcid project does not bend. He chooses to lay siege to Saguntum. The walls are high. The defenders are stubborn. The siege is brutal. In Rome, debates ignite. Some senators demand immediate war. Others argue for caution. Messages cross the sea too slowly to matter. By the time Rome fully reacts, Saguntum falls. When Saguntum's walls break, Hannibal is not just taking a city. He is picking a fight. Rome sends an embassy to Carthage, demanding Hannibal's surrender. In the Carthaginian council, voices argue. Some want to appease Rome, hand over Hannibal, and avoid another ruinous war. Others, especially those aligned with the Barcid faction, know that surrendering their most successful general would mean not just dishonor, but strategic suicide. The Roman ambassador, according to later tradition, holds out the folds of his toga and says, "In this fold, I carry peace and war. Choose." The Carthaginians tell him, "You choose." He drops his hand. "Then we choose war." Hannibal has his answer. Round 2 has begun. Most men, facing the Roman Republic head-on, would prepare to defend Iberia, shore up Carthage, fight Rome at sea. Hannibal does something no one expects. He looks at the map and thinks, what if I take the war to them? Not with a fleet, with an army on foot and horseback, marching across unknown lands, through friendly and hostile tribes, over mountains few armies have ever crossed. His officers stare at him as he lays out the plan. Cross the Ebro, subdue or negotiate his way past tribes along the route. Reach the Alps, cross them, men, horses, elephants and all. Descend into northern Italy. Turn Rome's world upside down by standing on their soil with a foreign army. It sounds insane. It is insane. It is also the only move bold enough to honor the oath that has been shaping his entire life. The boy who promised to be Rome's enemy is about to become something much worse than an enemy. A nightmare they cannot wake up from. By the time Rome truly understands what he's doing, Hannibal will already be on the move. And every step he takes will lead, eventually, to a hot, dusty plain in southern Italy, near a little town called Cannae, where Rome will learn what it means to put its entire faith in numbers, against a man who has spent his whole life studying how to break them. When Hannibal marches out of Iberia, he isn't just leaving a province. He's stepping off the normal script of ancient warfare. Most wars stay close to home. Most generals protect their supply lines like a heartbeat. Most cities try to fight the enemy far away, so disaster never reaches their own fields. Hannibal looks at that logic and thinks, good. Let them expect that. I'll do the opposite. From his base at Carthago Nova, he gathers his army, hardened Iberian infantry, used to savage close combat, Libyan spearmen, drilled in Carthaginian style, cavalry from Iberia and North Africa, fast, aggressive, lethal in pursuit, A handful of war elephants, living symbols that this is no ordinary force. Before he moves, he knows the price. Once he crosses the line of the Ebro, he is no longer defending Carthaginian interests in Spain. He is coming for Rome itself. Rome knows this too. That's why they insisted, in earlier treaties, that Carthage stay south of that river. So when Hannibal orders the crossing, it's not just men and animals wading into water, it's the sound of a boundary snapping. Behind him, anxious Carthaginian politicians wonder if he's provoking something they can't control. Ahead of him, Roman senators try to convince themselves he can be contained. Neither side fully understands yet. The war has just changed dimension. The lands north of the Ebro aren't empty. They're full of tribes who have no particular desire to become either Roman or Carthaginian. To reach Italy, Hannibal must either smash his way through everyone, bleeding his army dry before he even sees a Roman, or move like a surgeon's knife, fast, precise, and terrifying when needed. He chooses the second. Some tribes are bribed, offered gold, silver, promises of future favor, threatened, shown what happens to those who stand in his path, defeated when they misjudge and decide to test him in battle. Each encounter costs him something, men time supplies, but each also strips away another layer of uncertainty in his army. The soldiers see. Their new commander doesn't hesitate. He punishes resistance but doesn't waste strength. He is committed. There is no turning back. By the time Hannibal is north of the Pyrenees, those still with him know they are part of something too big to back out of. The cowards and doubters have peeled away. What's left is a core. They may not yet understand the full plan, but they know they are following a man who acts like the gods themselves are on a schedule he intends to keep. While Hannibal is cutting his way through Iberia's northern tribes, Rome is not asleep. The Senate has its own plan. One army, under Publius Cornelius Scipio, will sail to Massilia, modern Marseille, and then strike into Spain to neutralize Hannibal there. Another, under his colleague, will cross to North Africa if necessary, to threaten Carthage directly. On their maps, the logic is clear. We block him in Spain, break his base, and the war never reaches Italy. They think Hannibal's move is bold, but still predictable. He'll secure his rear first. He'll prepare long logistics. He'll follow the normal rhythm of campaigns. What they don't see is that they are preparing for a war that is already behind schedule. By the time Roman ships are heading to Massilia, Hannibal is no longer where he should be. He is already further north, already closer, already a problem no one expected to show up on their side of the Alps. Near the Rhone, the paths of Hannibal and Scipio almost cross like blades that never quite touch. Scipio arrives at Massilia and hears shocking news. Hannibal has already crossed the Ebro. He's moving fast. He's further north than anyone in Rome predicted. Scipio moves inland with part of his force, hoping to catch Hannibal near the river. He arrives to find tracks stories from locals. The echo of an army that has already moved on, according to some accounts. Hannibal uses his cavalry to screen his movements, crossing the Rhone upstream and then vanishing into the lands between the river and the Alps, before Scipio can force a battle. For a brief moment, the two men are within striking distance of each other. Then the window closes. Scipio faces a decision: chase Hannibal into unknown country with forces not prepared for that kind of pursuit, or return to Italy and be ready for the possibility that this Spanish problem will arrive in his homeland. He chooses to return. He is one of the first Romans to truly understand. He is coming here. The Alps aren't just hills on a map. They are a wall of stone and ice. To most generals, they are the end of a plan, not a stage of it. For Hannibal, They are a gamble he has to win. He knows the risks: altitude, cold, landslides, snow. Even in seasons where the lowlands bake narrow paths, where a single misstep can send men, horses, and elephants into endless ravines, he also knows the reward. If he succeeds, he appears in northern Italy with an army that no one thought could make that journey. The psychological impact alone is worth thousands of soldiers. As Hannibal's column begins to climb, the world changes. The air grows colder, the trees thin and twist. The friendly, familiar landscapes of Iberia and Gaul fall away behind them like a different life. The column is long, infantry wrapped in cloaks against the wind, cavalry leading horses that snort clouds into the cold air, elephants strange and massive, struggling on narrow ledges never meant for their weight, camp followers, supply animals, the entire moving ecosystem of an army. Local tribes watch from higher ground. Some offer guides for a price, pretend friendship while looking for weak points, wait for the right moment to strike at the back of the column. Hannibal has to be diplomat, general, spy all at once. He negotiates passage where he can, strikes hard when betrayed, builds emergency ramps, bridges, and paths where nature offers none. At one treacherous point, a path collapses beneath the weight of animals and equipment. Men slide, scream, vanish. Supplies crash into the abyss. Engineers and soldiers spend days cutting new footholds into frozen rock, using fire to crack the stone, then pouring vinegar into the fractures to widen them and carve a path. Part practical engineering, part legend, all desperation. Every meter gained costs blood. Not everyone in Hannibal's army shares his level of commitment. Some Iberian tribesmen did not expect to leave their homeland at all. Thought they were signing up for glory and pay, not freezing, starving marches in lands they've never heard of. At high camps along the route, fires burn low. Food runs thin, the men listen to. The wind howling down from higher peaks, the coughs and quiet shivers of comrades, the creak of ice and rock around them. Some look at the white ridges still ahead and think, no army can cross this and still fight at the end. Desertions happen. Groups slip away in the night, trying to find their way back down before the mountain takes them all. Hannibal doesn't chase every deserter. He can't spare the strength. He focuses on those who remain, walking among the camps, speaking to officers and common soldiers alike, pointing not just at the problem, but at the promise. On the other side of this wall, there is a land rich with grain and wine. The Romans think they are safe there. They do not expect us. Every step you take now is a step toward their home and our revenge. He turns the suffering into a shared initiation. If you survive this, you will not be an ordinary soldier. You will be one of the men who walked where no army walked, and lived. At the highest point of the crossing, the world opens around them. From a high ridge, Hannibal is said to have pointed out, somewhere far below and beyond the haze of distance. There, that is Italy. Whether every detail of that scene is literal or not, the meaning is clear. Hannibal sees not just mountains, not just an impossible journey, but the back door to Rome itself. For his men, the sight is a knife with two edges: hope. The descent has to be easier than the climb. Fear. Every step down on the far side is a step into enemy land, with no safe base behind them anymore. From that point onward, retreat is nearly as deadly as advance. They are committed. If the climb is torture, the descent is chaos. Paths coated in ice and loose stones, men stumbling with exhausted legs, animals panicking at sheer drops beside them. More men die going down than anyone is comfortable counting. Supplies are lost. Some elephants don't make it. Entire units are reduced to ragged fragments. By the time the army finally emerges onto the gentler slopes of northern Italy, It is smaller, but also harder. These are not raw recruits anymore. They are survivors of Iberian campaigns, veterans of mountain storms, men who have seen comrades vanish into abyss, and snow soldiers who've earned the right to believe that if they've come this far, they're meant for something huge. They set foot on Italian soil, not as invaders who took an easy ship ride, but as ghosts the Romans never expected to see. When news finally reaches Rome that Hannibal has crossed the Ebro, then the Rhone, then the Alps, the Senate is forced to face something it has rarely encountered: surprise. This is no longer a question of, how do we pressure Carthage over trade routes? It is, there is a hostile, battle-hardened army in northern Italy right now. The traditional Roman response to danger is straightforward: raise more legions, find the enemy, crank up the machine of the Republic until the problem is solved under iron and discipline. They are about to find out that this problem doesn't behave like other enemies. Hannibal knows the land he's stepping into is not just militarily strong, it's psychologically convinced of its own invincibility. So his plan is simple: bleed them until they start doubting the one thing they trust most: themselves. Before Cannae, before that great ring of death closes around a Roman super army, Hannibal will spend years carving pieces out of Rome's confidence. At the Trebia River, at Lake Trasimene, in countless small marches, ambushes and alliances, step by step, he will turn Italy itself into a weapon pointed back at Rome. Cannae will not be an accident. It will be the final movement of a long, carefully built symphony of fear. And the opening notes have just been played on the cold stones of the Alps. When Hannibal finally steps down from the Alps into northern Italy, he's not looking at a place. He's looking at a pressure point. Rome thinks Italy is its heart. Hannibal plans to turn that heart against itself. The first Romans. Hannibal meets in Italy aren't consuls with perfect plans. They're a vanguard, a force led by Publius Cornelius Scipio, the same man who had just missed him at the Rhone. They meet near the Ticinus River. It's not a massive battle, more a sharp, ugly clash of cavalry and light troops. Hannibal does what will become his habit. He uses his cavalry like a scalpel. Hits fast, hits where it hurts, and tests how the Romans react. Scipio is wounded. His teenage son, also named Publius, the future Scipio Africanus, is said to save him, dragging him off the field. The result is simple: Hannibal wins. Rome falls back. It's a small engagement on a map of great wars. But news travels. Rome hears, we met him, and we didn't beat him. That is new. Rome answers the way Rome always does. Send more men. A larger Roman army under Tiberius Sempronius Longus and the wounded Scipio forces a showdown near the Trebia River. It's winter cold, the kind of cold that hurts your teeth when you breathe. Hannibal wakes up with an idea. If they want numbers, I'll let the weather count for me. He lets the Romans start the day with empty stomachs, provoking them into battle early. Sends his cavalry and skirmishers to harass them, baiting them into crossing the icy Trebia. Keeps his own men fed and warmed before the fight. Roman infantry wade chest-deep through freezing water, then climb up the far bank, soaked numb, already half broken before a single spear is thrown. Hannibal's main line meets them head-on. But that's only half the trap. He has hidden a picked force under Mago, his brother, in reeds and hollows near the Roman flank. As the Roman army is fully engaged, this hidden force crashes into their side and rear, pinned in front, hit from behind, chilled to the bone. The Roman formation buckles. Thousands die. Others flee in small groups. Again, Rome has sent a big army. Again, Hannibal has used terrain weather timing to turn that into a weakness. He isn't just winning battles, he's doing it in ways that make Roman generals look stupid. While Roman blood seeps into Italian rivers, Hannibal does something equally important. He talks. He knows. Rome's strength is not just its legions. It's the web of alliances tying Italian cities and tribes to the Republic. So between battles, he releases captured Italians with kind treatment, keeps his worst punishments for Roman citizens, sends messages to cities and tribes. Rome demands your sons and your taxes. I demand only that you stop dying for them. Some allies stay loyal to Rome. Fear, habit, and Roman garrisons hold many in place. But the message is planted. There is another option. Every defeat Rome suffers waters that seed. Rome, humiliated, does what proud powers often do after a stinging loss. It picks a commander who hates caution. His name is Gaius Flaminius. He has a reputation for boldness, populist politics. A deep desire to prove himself, Hannibal reads men like maps. He sees Flaminius not as a threat, but as an opportunity. Hannibal moves south, crossing the Apennines, marching where no one expects him, even driving his army through swampy land that blinds some of his own men. He bursts into Etruria, ravaging the countryside, burning fields and villas. It's not random cruelty. It's a hook. He wants Flaminius to see smoke on the horizon and follow it like a bull, charging a red cloth. Flaminius obliges. Near Lake Trasimene, Hannibal finds the perfect stage. A narrow road between the lake and the hills, ground that forces an army into a long, thin column, hills that can hide thousands of men on a misty morning, with fog hugging the water and slopes. The Roman army marches in. They see some of Hannibal's troops ahead, apparently retreating. What they don't see, the thousands of Carthaginian and allied soldiers already hidden along the heights above them. When the entire Roman column is inside the trap, Hannibal gives the signal. The hills erupt. Infantry charge down from above. Cavalry sweep in to cut off escape. The fog turns every shout into a ghostly echo. No one can see how bad it really is. They just know the enemy is everywhere. The Roman army doesn't form a line. It disintegrates. Men are cut down in clumps. Some are driven into the lake and drown. Others throw down their weapons and try to swim away, only to be dragged under by panic and armor. Flaminius himself dies in the chaos. An entire Roman army ceases to exist in a single morning's blind confusion. When news of Lake Trasimene reaches Rome, it arrives like a physical blow. This isn't a frontier disaster anymore. This is 2 huge defeats in Italy, 2 Roman armies gone, 1 foreign general moving wherever he wants in their homeland. Refugees pour in with stories. Fields burned. Villages looted Hannibal's cavalry, seen like ghosts in places no one expected. For the first time in living memory, Rome looks in the mirror and sees something it doesn't recognize: fear. The normal machinery of the Republic, consuls, Senate, debates, suddenly feels too slow. So Rome does something it keeps in reserve for moments like this. It appoints a dictator. Not the modern kind. Not a permanent tyrant. A legal temporary office with absolute power to act in a crisis. His name is Quintus Fabius Maximus. History will give him a nickname: Cunctator, the Delayer. Fabius looks at the situation and makes a decision that will infuriate half of Rome. He will not give Hannibal the big, decisive battle he wants. Instead, he shadows Hannibal's army at a distance, blocks some roads, burns some supplies, orders scorched earth policies where necessary, harasses foragers and small detachments, refuses over and over to line up his legions opposite Hannibal's for a clean fight. To proud Roman eyes, this looks like cowardice. Young hotheads snarl, "Are we Romans or frightened goats?" But Fabius understands something the others don't yet. In an open, pitched battle, Hannibal is better. We cannot give him his preferred game. So he changes the rules. Rome's strength is manpower and time. Hannibal's weakness is supplies and distance from home. If Rome can avoid another catastrophic defeat, Hannibal's position will slowly erode. It's a cold, unglamorous strategy. It requires patience, discipline, the ability to endure public scorn. Hannibal tries to bait him. Burning fields, while Roman soldiers watch from hills under orders not to attack, leaving gaps that beg for an ambush to be sprung. Sending raiders almost to the gates of Rome to spark outrage, Fabius endures it. He becomes, in some eyes, the man who saved Rome by not fighting. In others, the man who humiliated Rome by acting like it was suddenly weaker. Inside the city, Fabius's policies tear at Roman identity. This is a culture built on aggression, personal glory in battle, the belief that courage can solve everything. Now, their highest commanders telling them, do nothing rash, wear him down, survive. Politics reacts. Fabius's power is limited by the term of his dictatorship. As his period ends, other voices grow louder. Senators who lost sons at Trebia and Trasimene, ambitious men who see glory in a decisive victory, citizens who can't bear the thought of a foreign general roaming their countryside unchallenged. Rome starts to think, Fabius kept us alive, but someone else will deliver the victory. They begin to dream again of one huge cleansing battle, the kind of battle where they throw everything they have at Hannibal and crush him under sheer weight. Hannibal listens through spies and scouts and smiles. He knows the psychology now. Rome might tolerate survival for a while, but sooner or later, it will choose risk over humiliation. All he has to do is stay alive, keep the pressure on, and wait for the day when Rome decides to bet its future on one roll of the dice. Over the next months and years, Hannibal moves like a storm across the Italian landscape, winning allies in the south, like Capua, seduced by victories, fighting mid-sized battles, raids, maneuvers that keep Roman armies cautious and angry at the same time, proving again and again that in local engagements he can outthink and outmaneuver Roman commanders. But Hannibal also feels the invisible clock ticking. He is deep in enemy territory. Carthaginian support is limited and hesitant. Some Italian allies are waiting to see if Rome finally lands a solid punch. He knows he needs something that will terrify Rome, impress potential allies, carve his name into the spine of the Republic, not just another ambush, a statement. In Rome, the political pendulum swings away from Fabian caution. Two new consuls come to power, Lucius Aemilius Paulus, more cautious, more experienced. Gaius Terentius Varro, a man of the people, loud, aggressive, eager to prove that Rome still knows how to attack. They inherit a plan driven less by strategy and more by emotion. We will assemble the largest army Rome has ever fielded. We will find Hannibal, and we will end this. They gather, legion after legion, allied contingents from across Italy, so many men that some historians estimate up to 80,000 infantry and 6,000 horse, 10,000 cavalry answering the call. It is not just an army, it is Rome's pride, concentrated on one field. Hannibal hears about this super army. He doesn't flinch. He looks for a place where numbers become a trap, not an advantage. He finds it near a dusty little town in Apulia, close to the river Aufidus. The town's name is Cannae. There, on a broad, flat plain, with a steady wind and loose dust, Hannibal will create the perfect stage for his most terrifying lesson. Rome, tired of delaying, is marching straight into it. And when the sun rises over Cannae, both sides will think they know what victory looks like. By sunset, the word will never mean the same thing again. ChatGPT puede cometer error. The morning at Cannae doesn't feel like the end of the world. It feels like a chance. For the first time since Hannibal entered Italy, Rome has brought everything. Dust hangs in the warm Apulian air. The river Aufidus winds lazily nearby. The ground is mostly flat, open, hard-packed, the kind of terrain Roman officers dream about. Rome has assembled a monster, tens of thousands of heavy infantry, packed in deeper ranks than usual, lines of allied infantry from across Italy, 2 wings of cavalry, Roman on one flank, allied horse on the other. It's not a subtle force, it's a hammer. The idea is simple. We will hit him frontally, so hard that no trick, no ambush, no cunning will matter. 2 consuls share command. Lucius Aemilius Paulus, cautious, experienced, wary of Hannibal's reputation. Gaius Terentius Varro, loud, ambitious, confident that Rome's strength is in bold strikes. They alternate command day by day. On the day of Cannae, it is Varro's turn, Hannibal's view. From his side, Hannibal looks out at a Roman army so huge it seems to darken the horizon with shields. He doesn't let the size intimidate him. He asks a different question. How do they think they are going to win? The answer is obvious. By crushing his line in the center, by using their depth, pushing and pushing until his troops simply can't hold. So Hannibal decides, fine, I'll give them the center. He arranges his army in a way that would terrify a normal general. In the front and center, he puts his lighter, more flexible infantry, Iberians and Gauls, men who fought with him again and again. He pushes them forward into a bulge, a convex curve facing the Romans. On the flanks of this bulge, set slightly back, he places his African heavy infantry, veterans armed with long spears and captured Roman equipment, disciplined and dangerous. They will not start the battle. They will finish it. On the wings, on one side, his elite Iberian and Celtic cavalry, strong and aggressive. On the other, his Numidian light cavalry, fast as smoke, expert at harassing and chasing. To a casual observer, Hannibal's line looks thinner, more fragile than the Roman wall. To Hannibal, it looks exactly like what it is, a mouth. There is one more factor, invisible on a map, the wind. That day, it blows in such a way that when the 2 armies close, dust from the dry ground will be whipped up into Roman faces. Hannibal can't control the weather, but he can choose where to stand in it. Every advantage counts. Dust in Roman eyes, sun at a bad angle, confusion in the most crowded parts of their formation. He is setting up not just a physical trap, but a sensory one. Trumpets sound. The Roman infantry begin to move, a massive block of men, shields up, spears and swords ready. They've been packed deeper than usual, more ranks behind the front line. A tighter, heavier formation. Commanders believe this will increase punching power, turn the center into a battering ram. From above, if you could see it clearly, it would look like a great red rectangle slowly swallowing the space between the armies. Across the field, Hannibal's bulging center steps forward. Iberians and Gauls shout war cries, clash shields, begin the long, terrifying walk toward impact. The 2 fronts collide. Noise explodes. At first, it feels like any brutal infantry fight. Men grunting and screaming, shields smashing together, spears thrusting, swords cutting, the front line a blur of faces, metal and blood. The Romans push. It's what they're built to do, step by step, shoulder to shoulder, using weight and discipline to grind down whoever is in front of them. Hannibal's central infantry begin to give ground. Not all at once, not in a rout, in a controlled, gradual, painful way. They step back, fight, step back again, stay just long enough to keep the Romans engaged. The bulging convex line slowly flattens. Then it begins to curve inward. from convex to straight to concave. To the Roman soldiers in the middle, it feels like success. They're breaking. We're driving them back. They cheer, press harder, dig deeper into Hannibal's formation. But they don't realize what their eyes, fixed on the men directly in front of them, can't see. As they surge forward, their flanks are no longer parallel to Hannibal's. They are becoming exposed to something waiting on either side. The flanks wake up. Hannibal's African infantry on the left and right have been waiting. They've watched the center pull back, not with panic, but with discipline. They see the Roman formation swelling into the gap. They see Roman shields turn inward to hit the retreating center and away from them. Now Hannibal gives the signal. The African infantry pivot like closing doors. From both sides, they slam into the Roman flanks. These are not light skirmishers. They are heavily armed killers, many with equipment as good as the Romans, some of it taken in earlier battles. They drive their spears and swords into the exposed sides of the Roman mass, places shields don't cover well. The Roman front ranks, still focused on what they believe is a collapsing center, suddenly feel sideways pressure, blades punching into ribs, shield edges slamming into arms and necks, panic crawling up their spines. The neat rectangle starts to warp. It doesn't stop the battle, it changes its shape. While this horror unfolds in the middle, the wings of cavalry decide whether the trap fully closes. On one Roman flank, their cavalry faces Hannibal's Iberian and Celtic horse. The fight is savage, close contact, men pulled from saddles, horses screaming and rearing. But the Roman cavalry is outnumbered, less confident in this kind of fast, vicious melee pinned between skilled enemy riders and the pressure of their own infantry line. They begin to break. What starts as a controlled withdrawal turns into a rout. Some flee the field, others die trying. On the Roman other flank, their allied cavalry faces the Numidians, light, fast riders who throw javelins, harass from range, disappear when chased, come back when the enemy is disorganized. They don't need to win a glorious charge. They just need to keep the allies busy and slowly tear them apart. Eventually, Roman and allied cavalry on both sides are either dead driven off, too shattered to make a difference. Hannibal's horsemen are now free, and they know exactly where to go. As the Roman infantry struggles, pressing forward into the stubborn, retreating center, straining sideways under the surprise attack from African flanks, a new sound rises behind them, the thunder of cavalry from the rear. Hannibal's victorious horse sweep around the battlefield and crash into the Roman back. There is no longer a front, a left or right, a safe rear. The Roman army has become something else. A crowd boxed in on all sides by enemies. Carthaginian and allied infantry in front and on the flanks. Cavalry at the back. A complete encirclement. The maneuver that military schools will one day call a double envelopment is now a living nightmare for the men inside it. They stand, undefined by clean lines, crushed together so tightly that many cannot even raise their arms properly. They came to Cannae to show Hannibal what Roman courage looks like. Now they are about to find out. Courage without space is just fuel for a slaughter. From the hills around Cannae, the battlefield doesn't look like tactics anymore. It looks like a slow drowning. Once Hannibal's cavalry slams into the Roman rear and the African infantry bite into both flanks, the Roman army changes shape. It is no longer a proud line, or a solid rectangle or an organized formation at all. It becomes a crushed oval of men, packed so tightly that each soldier can feel the breath and heartbeat of the man in front of him. In theory, Rome still has the advantage in numbers. In reality, those numbers are now a curse. The men in the very front ranks can still fight. They see the enemy. They can thrust, slash, push. But behind them, soldiers are so tightly jammed that many cannot swing a sword properly. Some can barely lift their arms above shoulder height. Men are forced forward by the pressure behind them, even when they try to step back or dodge. Those in the middle are trapped in a human vice. They hear the screams. They feel the shudder of bodies taking blows. They smell blood and fear. But they have nothing to hit except the backs of their own comrades. Those at the back know there is an enemy there too, the ring of cavalry tightening. But turning to face them in any ordered way is almost impossible. The Roman army has become a crowd, not a unit, and crowds die differently than armies. For Hannibal's troops, the encirclement means something else. They can choose how to fight. The outer Carthaginian ring has space to breathe, space to rotate fresh men, in space to step back, regroup, then thrust forward again. The African infantry on the flanks work like butchers at a grindstone. They stab at unshielded sides and backs. When their arms tire, new ranks step up to take their place. They keep steady pressure without overextending. Iberian and Gallic infantry in the front fight with grim determination, no longer pretending to fall back. They now hold the line and keep the Romans locked in place. Behind Roman backs, Hannibal's cavalry circles like wolves, charging in where the Roman mass thins, cutting down any group that looks like it might break out in formation, slaughtering stragglers and runners before they can escape and reform elsewhere. Piece by piece, layer by layer, the outer circle eats into the inner one. The Romans cannot see the entire picture. All they know is that no matter which way they push, they find steel. Inside the Roman mass, death itself becomes distorted. Men who take mortal wounds don't always fall right away. There is nowhere to fall to. Some are held upright by the press of bodies, bleeding, choking, still standing because the men around them are jammed too tight to let them drop. Others are pushed forward by the ranks behind them. Even as they lose the strength to fight, they stagger, stumble, and end up serving as unwilling shields for the living pinned behind them. When they finally do collapse, they disappear under the feet of the survivors. The ground becomes slick. Men lose footing on bodies instead of earth. A fall means being trampled, not rescued. The heat grows intense. Armor trapping sweat and warmth. Breath hot and shallow. Dust kicked up by thousands of feet mixes with the copper tang of blood. For many Romans, the fight shifts from, how do we win, to, how do I die? With my face to the enemy and not smothered in the dark under my own comrades. Roman officers and centurions do not simply give up. They shout themselves hoarse. Close up, hold the line, push forward, face the flank. But sound doesn't travel properly through a packed, howling mass. The front hears one thing. The center hears another. The back hears nothing clearly at all. Trumpets that normally carry orders across a field are drowned in the roar of total combat. Some pockets of men manage to form tighter knots of resistance. They lock shields in a small circle. They fight back to back, trying to carve out a little breathing space. These groups inflict real damage on their attackers until the outer ring focuses on them. Javelins, spears, and arrows rain into the knot. Cavalry swoop in to crush it from one side, while infantry hammer it from the other. Without the ability to coordinate, Roman courage becomes scattered sparks snuffed out one by one. At the top of this collapsing pyramid stand the two consuls, Lucius Aemilius Paulus, Gaius Terentius Varro. They experienced the disaster differently. Paulus, the more cautious of the two, had reportedly argued against attacking Hannibal on his chosen ground. Now, surrounded by fugitives and the wounded, he refuses to abandon the field. He is offered a horse, a chance to escape. He sends others away instead, choosing to die with the soldiers. To later Roman writers, he becomes a tragic figure. The man who saw the danger and fell anyway, trying to hold back the flood. Varro, the consul of the day, finds a small gap and flees with a fragment of cavalry. His escape is not dignified. Many will blame him for Cannae, but his survival has a practical effect. Someone has to carry the news back to Rome. Someone has to organize whatever can be rebuilt. In the language of strategy, one consul dying and the other living is better than both dying pointlessly in the crush. On the field, that logic doesn't matter. All that matters is that the high command has effectively dissolved. The Roman super army is now a beheaded body, thrashing on instinct alone. Not every Roman dies at Cannae. As the ring tightens and organized resistance collapses, Hannibal's men begin to take prisoners, especially among the wealthier, better-armed survivors. Status usefulness, the policies Hannibal wants to send as a message. Italians from allied cities are often treated more gently, used to spread the idea that Hannibal is a better alternative to Rome, released or ransomed in ways that sow doubt about Rome's ability to protect them. Roman citizens, especially nobles, face a harsher fate. Bound, sorted, marched away to be used as bargaining chips. Many will spend years in captivity, their lives hanging on political decisions they cannot influence. A handful of soldiers, especially cavalry who broke out early, escape entirely. They ride hard across dust and distance. They will arrive at Roman towns and camps with eyes still full of what they saw. Their words will carry the first raw description of Cannae to a city that has no idea yet how bad it really is. When the killing winds down and the shouting fades, what's left on the field barely looks human. Ancient sources disagree on exact numbers, but they agree on one thing. This is one of the bloodiest single days in ancient military history. Some reckon around 50,000, 70,000 Romans and allies killed, thousands more captured. A huge portion of Rome's officer corps wiped out in one afternoon. Exact figures don't matter to the men doing the counting. They walk among piles of bodies, recognizing banners trampled in the dirt, finding friends and commanders face down in blood, stripping armor and weapons from those who won't need them anymore. For Hannibal's army, the field is a source of supplies, arms, armor, equipment, a statement, proof that even Rome can be reduced to a heap of corpses. For future Roman generations, Cannae will become shorthand, and not just for defeat, but for annihilation. As evening creeps over Cannae, and the last screams fade into groans and silence, Hannibal stands over a victory so absolute it almost bends the mind. He has surrounded and destroyed a Roman army far larger than his own, removed tens of thousands of enemies from the war in a single day, terrified Rome's allies and thrilled its enemies. His officers are ecstatic. Many insist, now, take this momentum and march straight on Rome. End it before they recover. Hannibal hesitates. His reasons are cold. His troops are exhausted. He lacks heavy siege equipment. Rome's walls are high and strong, and the city can still raise desperate defenders from its population. A failed siege, after such a perfect victory, could undo the psychological shock of Cannae. So instead of a direct march on Rome, Hannibal chooses a different exploitation. He sends news and trophies to Carthage, including piles of signet rings cut from dead Roman officers' fingers. He moves to encourage more Italian cities to defect from Rome. He waits for the Carthaginian leadership to send the flood of reinforcements that such a victory seems to deserve. Tonight, on the field of Cannae, it feels like the world should break in his favor. But outside this ring of dust and blood, decisions in Carthage, debates in Rome, the stubborn will of a wounded republic are already forming the next moves. Cannae is not the end. It is the pivot. From here, the war will enter a new phase, one where Hannibal owns the greatest single victory. But Rome will decide what to do with the defeat. Cannae should have been the day Rome died. By every normal rule of war, losing that many men, that many officers, that much prestige, in a single afternoon, should have broken the Republic. It didn't. As the dust settles over Cannae, a handful of Roman survivors tear themselves away from the massacre. Among them rides Gaius Terentius Varro, the consul who commanded that day. His face is not the face of a victor riding home to claim honor. It's the face of a man who has seen 3/4 of his army vanish. Fellow consul Paulus swallowed by the crush of men and steel. The best youth of Italy lying in heaps on a field that will haunt Rome for generations. He rides hard, passing burned farms and frightened villagers who don't yet know how bad the news really is. When he finally reaches Roman territory, messengers fan out ahead of him. They carry a simple message: we have lost badly. But there are no numbers that can prepare a city for the truth of Cannae. Inside Rome's walls, life continues for a moment as if the world is still normal. Merchants argue over prices. Children play in courtyards. Senators debate routine matters. Then the messengers arrive. They bring lists of dead officers, names that echo in the Senate halls, reports of legions annihilated, the confirmation of the worst rumor. Hannibal still lives, and he is still in Italy. The city's mood turns in a heartbeat. Families rush to the forum looking for news of sons, fathers, brothers. Mothers claw at officials, begging for names. The streets fill with cries as reality hits home. For many cities, this would be the moment when courage stops. In Rome, something else happens. Some voices whisper the unthinkable, send envoys, ask for terms, buy time, survive. They are not cowards, they are realists, but realism is not what Rome is built on. The Senate meets in emergency session. The air is thick with grief and anger. Dozens of senators are dead at Cannae, or have lost sons and relatives. The Republic's political class has been shredded along with its army. When the suggestion comes to consider negotiations with Hannibal, one answer cuts through the noise. We do not bargain with an enemy who stands on our soil, holding Roman prisoners. It's not just pride, it's strategy. They know that if they show weakness now, Italian allies will defect in waves. They know Hannibal's entire plan depends on Rome behaving like a normal beaten power. So Rome makes a decision as insane in its own way as Hannibal's march over the Alps. We will pretend this is survivable until it becomes true. Rome orders no public displays of wild grief that might fuel panic. No mass funerals that admit how deep the cut is. Official mourning, yes, but discipline above all. Mothers tear their hair in private. Families wail behind closed doors. In public, the city becomes a machine. The Senate and magistrates call up new levies, boys younger than usual, men older than usual. Reach into the slave population, offering freedom for those who will serve. Release criminals from chains on the condition that they fight. Smiths and armorers work day and night. Temples are busy too. Sacrifices to the gods, not as excuses, but as a kind of spiritual logistics, trying to make sure divine favor is at least not openly hostile. Inside the walls, Rome turns its fear into a kind of furious activity. We will raise new armies. We will not leave Italy open. We will not let Cannae be the last word. Hannibal knows he has given Rome the worst day in its military history. He also knows that even his army has limits, so he makes a move that would make sense almost anywhere else. He offers terms, not full peace, but prisoner exchanges, negotiations, a chance for Rome to admit the scale of its loss. Hannibal's envoys come to Rome with a clear calculation. If Rome recognizes defeat enough to bargain, the psychological barrier breaks. Italian allies will think, Rome is negotiating, maybe we should too. It doesn't work. The Senate listens, and then answers in a way that must have stunned Hannibal's side. We will not pay for Roman captives taken in a battle we refuse to recognize as decisive. The message behind the insult is sharper. We prefer to raise new men rather than buy back those who laid down their arms. We refuse to let you turn Cannae into a formal, signed reality. For the prisoners in Hannibal's hands, it's a cold sentence. For the war, it's decisive. Outside Rome, Italian cities and tribes watch all of this with wide eyes. They've lost men at Cannae too. They've seen villages burned, fields trampled. They ask themselves, is Hannibal the future? Is Rome finished? Who protects us now? Some make their choice quickly. Capua, rich and proud, swings to Hannibal's side. Cities in Brian, southern Italy, old enemies of Rome, sense a chance to unshackle themselves. Hannibal's map of allies grows, but not as fast as his victory deserves. Key states, especially in central Italy, hold. Why? Because they're watching not just Hannibal, but Rome. And Rome is sending a signal with every action. We are hurt, we are bleeding, but we are not collapsing. To some allies, Hannibal still looks like a storm. Rome still looks like the mountain. In the new panic after Cannae, one figure many Romans mocked earlier suddenly looks different. Quintus Fabius Maximus. The man who once refused to fight Hannibal now seems less like a coward and more like a prophet. His doctrine returns. Avoid big battles. Follow Hannibal's movements. Cut supply lines when possible. Force him to keep moving and consuming. Let time and distance do what frontal attacks could not. Rome begins too. Scatter small garrisons in key places. Form shadow armies that track Hannibal but refuse to be lured into another Cannae. Use its naval power to pressure Carthaginian holdings elsewhere, forcing Carthage to split its focus. Hannibal, for all his brilliance, is now stranded in a country that refuses to play his game again. On paper, Cannae is perfect. On the ground, it is absolute. In the logic of most wars, it should have ended things. But Hannibal's masterpiece suffers from one flaw no tactic can fix. It does not change who controls Rome's resources. The Republic still has a deep pool of manpower in Italy, a political system that can absorb catastrophic losses without collapsing into palace coups, an economy that, while wounded, can still fund new legions, a brutal, stubborn culture that has learned from every defeat and keeps applying those lessons. Hannibal stands in southern Italy with an undefeated army and a trail of victories behind him. But no siege engines, no fresh waves of reinforcements, and no single gigantic ally willing to throw its whole weight behind him. Cannae has given him a terrifying reputation, a ring of new allies that can be fickle, a position inside Italy that is powerful but not decisive. Rome, bleeding but alive, has given itself a different gift, a hardened understanding of what Hannibal is capable of, and a clearer sense of what never to do again. From here on, every Roman commander knows one fact. If we give him another Cannae, it's our fault. So they don't. They will lose more battles. They will suffer more raids, more burned fields, more humiliations. But they will not march another giant, overconfident army into a perfectly designed trap. Hannibal has shown them the worst possible way to fight him. They have learned the lesson in blood. The war is far from over. But from this point forward, it is no longer about how brilliantly Hannibal can destroy Roman armies. It's about whether he can turn those doomed victories into something larger, while facing an enemy that has finally realized that sometimes the bravest thing you can do in war is refuse to give your enemy the battle he wants. After Cannae, Hannibal is the most feared man in the Mediterranean. He has shattered Rome's greatest army, killed a generation of its leaders, and shown the world that the Roman war machine can be broken. But fear alone doesn't topple a republic. He needs something bigger, a base in Italy, a city rich enough, strong enough, proud enough to stand as a rival to Rome. He finds it in Capua. Capua sits in fertile Campania, on land so rich the Romans used to call it the happy countryside. It's not some tiny hill village. It is wealthy, with grand houses, baths and temples. Its fields produce wine and grain in abundance. Its nobles are proud, resentful of Roman dominance, and very aware of their own importance. For years, Capua has lived in Rome's shadow, supplying troops, paying taxes, watching Roman magistrates throw their weight around. After Cannae, the city's elite look at Rome and see defeated armies, dead consuls, a republic on its knees. They look at Hannibal and see a general who has never lost to Rome and Italy, an army camped in their region, a once-in-a-lifetime chance to switch sides and maybe end up on the winning team. When Hannibal approaches Capua, he isn't just a visitor, he is a proposal. Inside Capua's walls, debate burns hot. Some say, Rome is wounded, but still dangerous. If we betray them and Hannibal fails, they will destroy us. Others argue, if we don't move now, we'll forever be Rome's servants. Hannibal has proved what he can do. Rome has proved it can be beaten. In the end, ambition and resentment win. Capua throws open its gates to Hannibal. It becomes his winter base, his showpiece ally, the symbol he can point to and say, look, even Italy's richest cities now stand with me. Rome's reaction is immediate and cold. Capua has chosen Hannibal. Capua has chosen to die as an enemy of Rome. They don't forget, they don't forgive, but they do not rush in blindly. They've learned that lesson. For Hannibal's soldiers, arriving in Capua must feel like dropping out of a nightmare into a dream. After the hell of the Alps, the cold rivers of northern Italy, the massacres, the marches, the hunger, Capua is warm, comfortable, full of food, wine and pleasures. Ancient writers, especially Roman ones, love the story that Capuan luxury ruined Hannibal's army. Warriors became soft in baths and banquets. It's a neat moral. Victory breeds decadence. Decadence breeds defeat. Reality is more complicated. Hannibal needs his men to rest. He needs to reward them after years of hardship. He needs Capua to feel like a partner, not just a barracks. Still, there is a risk in staying too long. The army gets used to comfort. The shock of Cannae slowly fades. Rome uses every day of that winter to rebuild. While Hannibal enjoys a friendly city, Rome is turning its entire society into a war factory. From Capua, Hannibal launches a political offensive as important as any battle. He sends messengers to cities of southern Italy, old enemies of Rome, like some Samnites and Greek cities regions where Roman rule has always felt more like occupation than partnership. His message is simple. Rome bleeds. I can protect you. Join me now, and when Rome falls, you'll stand beside the new master of Italy. And some do join. Capua itself, cities in Campania, Lucania, Bruttium. Later, the strategically important Tarentum in the south will open its gates to him. On a map, Hannibal's color spreads down the boot of Italy. But in the center and north, in the old Latin heartland, something frustrating happens. A hard core of cities refuse to move. They watch Cannae. They see the smoke. They count their dead. And still they think, Rome may be wounded, but siding with Hannibal is more dangerous. They gamble on Rome's recovery. Slowly, that bet will turn out to be right. Rome's response to Hannibal's new capital in Capua comes in two shapes. The shield, the cautious delaying strategy of Fabius. The sword, the aggressive counterattacks of men like Marcus Claudius Marcellus. Fabius and those who think like him shadow Hannibal's movements, guard key roads and passes, block him from getting too close to Rome itself, cut his supply lines when they can. Marcellus earns his nickname, the Sword of Rome, by doing what Rome now needs in moderation, striking Hannibal's allies, launching rapid attacks on Carthaginian garrisons, giving the Roman people at least some victories to celebrate. Together, this shield and sword approach creates a new reality. Hannibal is dangerous, but he is no longer free to roam Italy as he did in the first years. Every move has a cost. One of the places where this new Roman attitude shows itself is the city of Nola. Hannibal, eager to repeat the pattern of Capua, intimidate a city, get it to defect, moves against Nola. Inside, Commander Marcellus is waiting. He is not Fabius. He is not going to give open battle on Hannibal's terms. But he also refuses to let Nola become another Capua. As Hannibal probes the defenses, Marcellus launches sharp, controlled sorties. Roman troops rush out in sudden attacks, then retreat quickly behind the walls. Hannibal's men are stung, pushed back, frustrated. It's not a crushing Carthaginian defeat. It's not a glorious Roman annihilation. It's something quieter. Proof that Rome can stand up to Hannibal in a controlled engagement without being smashed. For the Roman people, hungry for any good news, Nola is a symbol. The first real sign that Hannibal is not unstoppable. The suggestion that with the right commander and the right mentality, he can be repelled. For Hannibal, Nola is an irritation, a reminder that every time a city doesn't flip to his side, his campaign gets heavier, slower, more complicated. Years pass. Hannibal stays in Italy, moving, fighting, negotiating. He wins more battles, but nothing like Cannae. He loses friends and family, his brother Mago sent abroad. Other Barcid allies working in Spain under increasing Roman pressure. Rome adjusts. It avoids big, suicidal clashes with Hannibal himself. It fights his allies instead, reconquering defected cities where it can, besieging others, punishing betrayal with brutal sieges and mass executions. It uses its navy to attack Carthaginian positions in Sicily, Sardinia, and Spain, squeezing the empire that should be feeding Hannibal's ambitions. On the Italian map, Hannibal's presence feels like a dark stain, but it is a fixed stain. He can hurt Rome. He can shame Rome. He can even kill more of its armies in local engagements. What he cannot do is force the Republic to admit defeat from a distance. From Carthage, from other kingdoms watching, it might still look like Hannibal is winning. He holds Capua, for now, strong positions in the south, a fearsome reputation, but underneath, a strategic trap is closing. Rome has learned to treat Hannibal as untouchable poison in the short term. Don't engage him recklessly, just contain him. Attack everything around him, his allies, his supply routes, his homeland. Every year Hannibal stays in Italy. His army wears down. New Italian recruits are fewer and less reliable. Carthage, hesitant and divided, never sends the overwhelming reinforcements he hoped for. He's like a dagger plunged deep into Rome's side, but a dagger that cannot be twisted quite far enough to reach the heart. Back in Capua, the mood ages badly. At first, Hannibal's presence brings prestige. The city feels like a co-capital of Italy. Capuan nobles walk a little taller, sure they've backed the winning horse. Then time passes. Roman armies begin to encircle Campania. Trade is disrupted. The promise that Rome will someday be out of the picture starts to sound thinner. Capuans ask themselves hard questions. Was this a glorious choice or a beautiful mistake? In Rome, plans are already forming for how Capua will be punished when the time is right. Hannibal can't be everywhere at once. He can't personally defend every ally against the full weight of Roman persistence. Capua will learn the cost of choosing the man who wins battles over the city that wins wars. But that chapter, the siege and fall of Capua, is still ahead. Hannibal has won the most perfect victory at Cannae. He has taken one of Italy's richest cities as his base. He has turned half the peninsula into a graveyard of Roman pride. And yet, far away in the Senate and training fields of Rome, something just as dangerous as Hannibal's genius is taking shape. A republic that has decided it would rather bleed for years than bow in a single day. While Hannibal stalks Italy, killing Roman armies and burning Roman fields, a different war is unfolding far away. One that he cannot easily see, but that will decide his fate. It's happening in Spain, and at its center is a young man who still has Cannae burned into his memory. His name is Publius Cornelius Scipio. One day, they'll call him Africanus. On a map, Hannibal's army in Italy looks like the spear. Spain is the arm that throws it. From Iberian mines and cities, Carthage draws silver to pay troops, reinforcements and officers, local warriors loyal to the Barcid family. As long as Spain stays strong, Hannibal has a psychological anchor, a powerful Barcid base still thriving, the potential for more brothers, more troops, more resources to feed his Italian campaign. Rome understands this. If it cannot kill Hannibal in Italy without losing more armies, it can still saw off the arm that feeds him. So while Hannibal prowls the fields of Apulia and Campania, Roman commanders quietly build a campaign against his family's power in Spain. At first, that campaign is led by two men, Gnaeus Cornelius Scipio, Publius Cornelius Scipio, the elder. Both are experienced generals. Both are members of the same family as the young Scipio, who watched his father bleed on a riverbank in the north. Young Scipio's war began long before Spain. He had fought at the Ticinus, where he reportedly saved his wounded father's life, been present at Cannae, where he saw the Roman system fail in the most catastrophic way possible. Cannae could have broken him. Instead, it turned into something else, a lesson in how not to fight Hannibal. He saw what happens when you pack too many men into too tight a space. What happens when overconfidence overrides caution? What happens when you let the enemy choose the ground and the moment? Where others only saw horror, Scipio memorized details. He didn't know yet that his life would eventually orbit Hannibal's. But he knew this: if we keep fighting like this, we will lose everything. Spain will become his laboratory for doing things differently. While Hannibal ravages Italy, the elder Scipios wage war in Iberia against Hannibal's brothers and allies. They secure Roman footholds on the Spanish coast, win allies among Iberian tribes who are tired of heavy Carthaginian control, launch campaigns against Barcid strongholds with mixed success. For a time, it looks hopeful. Carthaginian forces are stretched between Hannibal and Italy, defense of Carthage itself, and the Iberian theater. But war in Spain is tricky. The terrain is rough, loyalties are fluid, and the Barcid network is deep. Eventually, both elder Scipios are killed in Spain, cut down in separate actions by combined Carthaginian and native forces. For Rome, this is another shock. We are losing not just armies, but entire generations of commanders. For young Scipio, it becomes intensely personal. He has lost his father, he has lost his uncle, he has lost the senior members of his house on the very front that might decide the war. Rome now faces a choice: abandon Spain and focus everything on surviving Hannibal in Italy, or double down, sending new leadership into the same furnace that just consumed two experienced generals. The Senate hesitates. The war has already demanded so much. Then, in a moment that will echo through history, a young man steps forward with a mixture of audacity and destiny. In 218 BC, when Hannibal first entered Italy, Scipio was barely more than a boy. Now, after Cannae and the deaths in Spain, he's still young for high command. But he has something few others do: direct experience of Hannibal's methods, a prestigious name linked to sacrifice, a presence that men remember, calm, confident, unusually self-assured. When Rome debates who should take command in Spain, no one has an obvious answer. Many candidates are too inexperienced, too cautious, too tied down in other duties. Scipio does something insane. He volunteers, not just as a staff officer, not as second in command, as commander. Those present are said to have been stunned. He is young. He has not held the highest offices, but youth is not his only weapon. He speaks to the people and the Senate, not as an arrogant boy, but as someone who has already walked through Rome's worst fire. He talks about his father's death, his experience at Cannae, the need to take the war back to Carthage, not just absorb blow after blow. The mood in Rome has changed since the early days of Punic. They are tired of being on the back foot. Scipio offers, for the first time in years, a vision of offense that isn't suicidal. When the question is put, who will take command in Spain? The crowd chooses him. It is part logic, part emotion, part desperate faith. A young man now carries the responsibility of breaking the Barcid power at its root. When Scipio arrives in Spain, the situation is messy. Roman forces there are weakened and shaken. Carthaginian commanders like Hasdrubal Barca still hold strong positions. Iberian tribes are watching, weighing who deserves their loyalty. Scipio does not act like a typical Roman general. He understands something Hannibal has known for years. War is not just steel and numbers. It's imagination. So Scipio studies Hannibal's past campaigns obsessively, learns from his enemy instead of dismissing him as a barbarian lover, plans operations that emphasize surprise, speed, and daring, not just heavy infantry grinding forward. He wins his first major fame with a strike that feels very Barcid in its boldness. The city of Carthago Nova, New Carthage, is the jewel of Carthaginian Spain, a major port, a treasury for silver, a symbol of Barcid strength. Scipio plans something no one expects. Not a slow siege, not a cautious encirclement, a sudden assault. He studies the harbor, learns the tides, the depth of the lagoon, the weak points in the walls, times his attacks so that part of his force can wade through shallow water, where defenders do not expect an assault. When the attack comes, it's fierce and fast. Roman forces storm the main gates and walls. A special detachment, led through the lagoon at low water, hits the city from another side. Confused, struck where they feel secure, the defenders cannot coordinate. The city falls. Inside, the Romans capture huge stocks of weapons and armor, hostages from various tribes, who can now be used to secure alliances, Carthaginian treasures and records. It is more than a victory. It is a message. Rome can be clever too. Rome can learn. To Iberian tribes, Scipio suddenly looks less like a generic Roman and more like a man who might actually change things. To Hannibal, when he hears of it, it must feel like hearing a distant echo of his own youth. Bold, move, deep strike, psychological and material win in one blow. Except this time, the author of the move is his enemy. With New Carthage in Roman hands, the balance in Spain shifts. Scipio treats captured hostages well, using them to open negotiations with their home cities. gains new allies by showing both strength and restraint, starts to isolate Barcid commanders, forcing them onto the defensive. The Barcid brothers, Hasdrubal, Mago, and others, fight back fiercely. Clashes up and down the peninsula are brutal, but Rome is now present with a commander who won't repeat the mistakes of his elders, committed to grinding down Carthage's last great foreign resource hub. Every success Scipio has in Spain does something subtle but deadly to Hannibal in Italy. It reduces the chance that Hannibal will ever receive the massive reinforcements he needs to finish Rome. It undermines the narrative that Carthage is winning this war. It pulls the war's center of gravity gradually away from Italy. Hannibal remains undefeated in open battle on Italian soil, but increasingly he is undefeated in a war he is no longer winning. Scipio doesn't meet Hannibal yet. Their first face-to-face confrontation is still years away, on a different continent. But in this chapter of the war, they are already talking to the same allies, through different messengers, fighting the same struggle on different maps, learning about each other through reports and battlefield outcomes. Hannibal learns there is a Roman who thinks like a strategist, not just as a blunt force commander, uses speed and surprise with disturbing familiarity, has begun to hurt the Barcid legacy where it lives. Scipio learns to never underestimate the power of morale and perception, to combine Roman discipline with Hannibalic creativity, that to defeat Hannibal, he must fight him not just with legions but with ideas. Spain, then, isn't just another front. It is the forge where Rome creates the one man who can someday meet Hannibal on equal terms. The child who watched Cannae is becoming the general who will decide whether that disaster was the beginning of Rome's end, or just the most painful lesson in its survival. The day they finally meet will not be on Italian soil at all, but on the dry plains of Africa, outside a city called Zama. But before that, Hannibal still has years left in Italy, years in which he will watch the consequences of his greatest victory slowly unravel, not because he failed at Cannae, but because Rome refused to let Cannae be the last chapter. By now, Hannibal's story in Italy has two faces. On the battlefield, he is still the man who never loses. On the map, his world is shrinking. For Rome, Capua is not just a rebel city. It is a symbol of betrayal. It welcomed Hannibal. It celebrated his victories. It tried briefly to act like a second capital of Italy. Rome cannot let that stand. If Capua gets away with choosing Hannibal, what message does that send to every other ally still hesitating on the fence? So Rome does what Rome does best. It waits for the right moment. It brings up armies steadily, methodically. It uses its recovered strength to surround Capua step by step. Hannibal tries to relieve the city. He maneuvers. He threatens Rome itself, marching close enough to its walls that people on the ramparts can see his campfires. But the Romans do not blink. They refuse battle near their city. They refuse to pull back from Capua. For all his genius, Hannibal cannot be in two places at once. In the end, Capua is left to face Rome alone. The siege is brutal. Starvation, disease. Internal fighting in the city between factions who still hope for Hannibal and those who regret ever opening the gates. When Capua finally falls, Rome makes sure everyone is watching. Leaders are executed, exiled, their property seized. The city is stripped of political power. Its old privileges, it survives physically. Rome doesn't raze it to the ground, but it is broken as a rival. The message, Hannibal cannot save you. Rome can always come back. And when we do not forget. With Capua gone, Hannibal's map shrinks again. He still holds parts of Bruttium in the far south, pockets of support scattered across the heel and toe of Italy, a few strong points like Tarentum. Though even there, Rome regains the citadel, but he no longer has a rich central base, a glamorous ally city. The same aura of momentum Rome uses the Fabian strategy on a grand scale. It blocks roads and passes. It stations armies to watch Hannibal's movements. It retakes defected towns one by one, with sieges, bribes, or brutal examples. Hannibal's army becomes like a tiger in a shrinking cage, still deadly, still able to lash out. But each year, there's less space to move in. He can no longer hope to force Rome into a decisive battle on his terms. He can only hope that somewhere else in the world, Carthage will finally tip the balance. That somewhere else was supposed to be Spain. But as Chapter 8 showed, Spain is slipping. Scipio's victory at New Carthage is followed by more blows. He beats Carthaginian forces in Iberia in major engagements like Baecula and later Ilipa. He proves he can fight not just with tricks, but with patient positioning and disciplined execution. At Ilipa, Scipio uses a deployment that feels almost like a respectful echo of Hannibal's own style. He disguises his true intentions with formation and timing. He pins the enemy and strikes where they are weakest, turning the battlefield into a trap. When the dust settles, Carthaginian power in Spain is effectively broken. The Barcid dream of a Western empire, feeding and supporting Hannibal forever, is over. Spain now becomes a Roman hunting ground, a future base from which Scipio can threaten Africa itself. For Hannibal, still undefeated in Italy, this is a strategic disaster. The arm that threw the spear has been severed. He still stands, but now he stands alone. Back in Rome, Scipio returns from Spain as a different kind of Roman hero. Not a man who won one big battle and then failed, but a commander who took a collapsed front and turned it into a Roman success. A strategist who learns from the enemy instead of underestimating him. When the time for elections comes, Scipio runs for consul. He wins. And with that office comes the power to propose something many call madness. Stop chasing Hannibal in Italy. Go around him. Strike directly at Carthage. The idea is dangerous. Opponents argue, Hannibal is still in Italy. If we strip legions to send them abroad, he might strike at Rome again. Africa is too risky. We don't know the ground, and if Scipio fails, the war might be lost outright. Supporters argue, we have tried fighting him here. We have learned to contain him, not defeat him. If we threaten Carthage itself, they will be forced to recall Hannibal. The war will change from a nightmare on our soil to a fight on theirs. Scipio insists, this is the only way to finish what Cannae started. The Senate gives him a compromise. He is granted Sicily as his province. He may prepare for an African campaign, recruiting volunteers, training troops. But there is skepticism about actually letting him cross. Scipio treats Sicily like a giant training camp. He selects the hardest survivors from earlier defeats, men from Cannae and other battles who want another chance, drills them intensively, blending Roman discipline with the flexible tactics he admired in Hannibal, experiments with combined arms operations, infantry, cavalry, skirmishers working in concert. He is building not just an army, but a counter-Hannibal force. Troops who, no fear, have seen defeat are being reshaped into soldiers who will not break at the first shock. In Sicily's fields and camps, a new Roman sword is being sharpened. Before the full invasion, Scipio needs information. He also needs a first psychological blow against Carthage. He sends small forces to raid the African coast. Hit-and-run attacks on towns and estates close to Carthage, capturing prisoners and supplies. Probing defenses, learning how Carthage responds. These raids send two messages to Carthage. The war has come home. You are no longer safe behind the sea. To Rome, it is possible to fight on their soil and win. Confidence grows on both sides of the water, but in opposite directions. Carthage feels exposed. Rome feels something dangerous for the first time since Hannibal crossed the Alps. Hope. When Scipio finally lands in Africa with a full expeditionary force, the war shifts axis. He wins local allies, like Massinissa, a Numidian prince who will bring crucial cavalry. Fights Carthaginian armies in their own territory, including earlier commanders who once dreamed of reinforcing Hannibal, now forced to defend their homeland instead. Victories in Africa are a different kind of wound for Carthage. Losing Spain is painful, but it's far away. Watching Roman camps outside your own fields, seeing your own lands burned, that is existential. Carthage panics. The Senate in that city makes the decision Rome has been waiting for. Recall Hannibal. Recall Mago. Bring them home. We need them here. After more than a decade in Italy, Hannibal receives the order. The messages reach him in the south. He reads what they mean, not just come home, but the war you started in Italy will not be finished in Italy. He has crushed armies, bled the Republic, survived more than any invader in Rome's history. But the final act will now play out on Carthaginian soil. Hannibal begins to withdraw, burning what he cannot carry, saying goodbye to the Italian allies, who staked everything on him, leaving behind the graves of thousands of men who followed him across mountains and rivers. For Italy, his departure is almost unreal. For years, Hannibal has been a dark weather system over the peninsula. Now he is leaving, not defeated in battle, but called away by a political necessity he cannot ignore. For Rome, it's a strange mixture. Relief, the nightmare presence is gone. Fear, they know Scipio will soon face the same man who shattered them at Cannae. For Hannibal, the emotional weight is different. He once marched toward Rome with the momentum of a promise made on an altar as a boy. Now he sails away from Rome toward a final confrontation he did not choose, against an enemy he has never met, shaped by his own shadow. As Hannibal lands back in Africa, everything that has happened so far converges. The boy who swore hatred of Rome returns to defend a homeland that never fully backed him. The young Roman who watched Cannae from inside the disaster now stands at the head of an army crafted specifically to fight Hannibal's style. They are not just two generals, they are two different answers to the same problem. How do you survive a world where power is everything? Hannibal believes in speed, surprise, boldness, the will of a single genius to reshape the fate of nations. Scipio believes in learning from failure, adapting, and using the strength of a whole system to outlast any one man. The plain where they will finally meet has a name: Zama. There, far from the rivers of Italy and the snowy passes of the Alps, the war that began, with a boy's oath in Carthage and a city's pride on the Tiber, will come down to one last gamble. Elephants and veterans against flexible lines and new ideas. A man defined by his hatred of Rome against a man defined by surviving Rome's worst day. On the plains near Zama, the war stops being a collection of campaigns and becomes a conversation between two men. One has been haunting Rome for decades. The other has built his entire career learning how to kill that ghost. By the time Hannibal and Scipio face each other in Africa, both carry more than armor and titles. Hannibal brings veterans from Italy, the last survivors of the long campaign, fresh African levies scraped together by Carthage, a line of war elephants meant to smash Roman formations before the infantry even meet. He also brings something you cannot count: the memory of Cannae. Many of the men around him were there that day or have heard its story every night by the fires. Scipio brings tough, well-drilled Roman legions hardened in Spain and Africa, Numidian cavalry under Massinissa, fast, vicious, and finally fighting for Rome. A plan built from years of watching what happens when you fight Hannibal the wrong way. He also brings his own memory of Cannae, but not as a legend, as a warning. Before armies clash, the two commanders meet. They ride out into the space between lines, each surrounded by a small escort. But for a few moments, it might as well be only the two of them. Everything about that scene is heavy. The old lion of Carthage, lines on his face carved by hardship and thin hope. The younger Roman, not a boy anymore, carrying both the scars and the confidence of his long, grinding climb. We don't know every word they said, but the themes are clear. Hannibal offers something like, "Let's end this with terms. Too much blood has already been spilled. Carthage will accept limits. We don't both need to lose everything." Scipio listens. He respects Hannibal. How could he not? He has modeled half his own career on understanding him. But respect is not mercy. Scipio answers in effect, "You brought this war to us. You slaughtered our armies. You walked our land for years. We don't want balance. We want it finished. Negotiations die there, in the dust between two horses." Both men return to their lines knowing what that means. The only language left is steel. Hannibal knows he is not the same man who crossed the Alps. He is older. His army is a complicated mixture. Front line. War elephants, meant to terrify and disrupt the Romans. First infantry line. Fresh levies and mixed troops. Brave, but not deeply tested. Second line. Better quality African infantry. Third line. His Italian veterans. The men who have marched with him for years. Survivors of Trebia, Trasimene, Cannae, and a dozen other fights. He arranges them like a three-stage test. Elephants and front line to shake and blunt the Romans. Second line to grind them down. Veterans to finish whoever is left. He has seen Roman armies collapse under pressure before. He is betting that even Scipio's new Romans will break the same way once they are swallowed by chaos. If he can make this battle feel like Cannae again, he might still rewrite the war. Scipio looks at the same field and sees the main threat immediately. Not the infantry, the elephants. If they crash into tight Roman lines, they can smash formations, trigger panic, turn the first moments of battle into a disaster, so Scipio changes the shape of his army. He lines his legions up in the usual manipular pattern, small unit blocks. But instead of a solid wall, he leaves wide lanes straight through his formation. To someone looking quickly, it might even seem like a mistake. There are gaps. Isn't that dangerous? Only if you don't know what they're for. He orders his men, "Hold the line." When the elephants charge, don't clump together in fear. Open the lanes, use noise and missiles to spook and channel the beasts, straight through and out the back. The elephants will not meet a wall to crush. They'll meet corridors that turn their power sideways. Behind the legions, trumpets, shouting, and thrown javelins will turn any elephant that breaks through into a confused, panicked animal running away from Roman discipline. Not through it. It's a quiet, brilliant move. Scipio designs his army around Hannibal's first punch before the punch is even thrown. The battle begins with sound. Trumpets, war cries, drums, and horns. Hannibal's elephants move forward. A wall of grey muscle and tusk, bearing towers and riders, snorting, trumpeting, the ground trembling beneath them. For many Roman soldiers, this is their first real look at war elephants. Fear is natural. But this is not the panic of Trebia or Cannae. Scipio's men have been warned, trained, drilled. As the elephants close, Roman skirmishers hurl javelins. Trumpets and horns blast in their faces. Gaps open in the Roman line exactly where they were supposed to. Some elephants, wounded and confused, shy away from the noise and missiles. They turn, not into the Roman lanes, but sideways, and crash back into Hannibal's own cavalry on one flank, breaking his mounted wing before the infantry even meet. Others do exactly what Scipio hoped. They charge into the lanes, rushing through empty space, chased by shouts and spears from the sides, then burst out the back of the Roman army, no longer a weapon, just terrified animals fleeing the battle. The Roman line holds. The elephants are spent. Hannibal's first blow has landed on air. Now the real fight begins. With the elephants gone or scattered, Hannibal sends in his front infantry line. They clash with Scipio's legions in brutal close combat. Spears meet shields. Swords hack at shins and faces. Dust cloaks everything. These first Carthaginian ranks fight hard, but they lack the deep, shared experience of Hannibal's veterans. Scipio pushes them. The Roman lines advance, step by step, punching, stabbing, using their discipline and cohesion to grind down the front. Eventually, that first line breaks. Some survivors fall back in disorder toward Hannibal's second line. Others scatter. Now Hannibal faces a hard choice. Let the broken men fall back and reform them, risking their panic infecting the second line, or push his second line forward through the mess. The tangle costs him time and order. The second line moves up, but not with the crisp clarity a general dreams of. Scipio sees the confusion and presses. Again, the Roman infantry meet them in organized ranks. Again, they fight, strain, bleed. Again, bit by bit, the Romans push them back. The second line cracks. Now there's only one thing left between Rome and Carthage: Hannibal's veterans from Italy. These veterans are different. They have survived ambushes and battles that should have killed them, watched companions die in rivers, lakes, forests and fields, fought Romans on Italian soil for more than a decade. They are tired, but they are not soft. They form up and face the oncoming Romans with a kind of grim acceptance. If this is where it ends, we will at least make them feel it. Scipio does something important here. He doesn't just smash his tired front ranks straight into Hannibal's fresh veterans. He reforms his line. He takes the time to straighten ranks, bring up reserves, turn the scattered forward push into a clean, coherent front again. It's the opposite of panic. We will fight your best with our best form. The two veteran corps collide. For a while, it's not clear who will break. These are not the overconfident Romans of Cannae. These are hardened survivors who have been drilled, trained and led in a new way. These are not raw Carthaginian recruits. These are Hannibal's finest. The fight in the center turns into a grind worthy of any epic. No grand maneuvers, just ranks of men testing each other's will. Then the part Hannibal once owned in every battle turns against him. Remember the Numidian and Roman cavalry who had fought on the wings earlier? Scipio's mounted troops, with Massiniss's Numidians especially, have driven off the Carthaginian horse. They didn't stay busy, chasing them forever. They turn back, hooves pound the ground. Dust rises behind them. As Hannibal's veterans lock shields against the Roman front, they suddenly hear a sound they know too well. The roar of cavalry coming in from behind. This time, it's not Hannibal's riders slamming into a Roman rear. It's Scipio's. Numidian horsemen, Roman cavalry, swing around and crash into the back and flanks of Hannibal's last line. The shape is familiar. A force engaged from the front, then struck from behind. At Cannae, Hannibal used that pattern to erase Roman legions from the earth. At Zama, Scipio uses it to erase the last hope of a Barcid victory. Surrounded and squeezed, Hannibal's veterans fight on, but the logic of the battlefield has turned against them. There is no room to maneuver, no more hidden tricks, no more fresh reserves, only the long, slow collapse of a line that has held for years. When the battle finally ends, the field near Zama is littered with bodies. Carthaginian casualties are heavy. Roman losses are real, but vastly lighter. The result is not ambiguous. Scipio has beaten Hannibal. Back in Carthage, the Senate has no illusions. The city sues for peace. The terms are harsh. Carthage loses its overseas territories. Its navy is mostly stripped away. It must pay a crushing indemnity. It is forbidden to wage war without Rome's permission. Carthage is not dead. Not yet. But it is no longer a contender for dominance. Rome emerges from the Second Punic War as the true great power of the Western Mediterranean. Hannibal, amazingly, does not die at Zama. He returns to Carthage and becomes, for a time, a political reformer, fixing finances, fighting corruption, trying to rebuild his city. Within the limits of Rome's terms, it's a strange second life for a man who spent his youth burning Roman fields. Eventually, Rome decides even that is too dangerous. Under pressure, Hannibal goes into exile, wandering from court to court among Eastern kings who like having a living legend nearby more than they like risking Rome's anger. In the end, cornered and facing the prospect of being handed over to his old enemy, Hannibal chooses his own exit, taking poison, according to later accounts, rather than let Rome decide his final act. For your viewers, the story that began at Cannae doesn't end with a simple, and then Rome won. It ends with something more complicated and more powerful. Hannibal proved that even the strongest system can be broken in a single day by genius, preparation, and utter audacity. That maps and numbers mean nothing if your enemy understands morale and terrain better than you do. That a boy's oath can echo across continents. Rome proved that a state can survive unbelievable defeats if it refuses to accept them as final. That learning from pain is more powerful, in the long run, than winning every early battle. That you can be shattered at Cannae and still walk away with enough to build a Scipio. Scipio showed that the greatest tribute you can pay an enemy is to study him and then beat him at his own game. That adapting your tactics doesn't mean abandoning who you are. It means making who you are more dangerous. In the end, Cannae is not just the day Rome lost. It is the day Rome learned how close it could come to oblivion, and what it would take to step back from the edge. The day that forged the man who would meet Hannibal at Zama. The proof that sometimes the real outcome of a battle is written not in the bodies on the ground, but in what the survivors decide to do next. Hannibal walked away from Cannae with the greatest single victory an ancient general could dream of. Rome walked away with the most important lesson an empire could ever learn. Never give your enemy the same battle twice.